Hi
Awesome.
everyone. My name is Natalie Chan, and I'm the founder of Own Academy. And today we're so lucky to have Frankie Ng join us as a speaker at Own Future Fair. So thank you so much for being with us, Frankie.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So stoked to be here.
So to start off with, I think some students probably have read your profile, but I think it'd be great if you can give us a little bit background about yourself, like where you're from, what are you doing, and we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah, sounds good. So my name is Frankie Ng. I'm the Hong Kong lead at Shopify. And for those that don't know, Shopify is an e-commerce platform, allows anybody to set up an online business. So businesses that usually run on a .com website instead of being on a marketplace like eBay or Amazon, they typically run on software, and our software powers many of the biggest brands in the world. So you can think of Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, celebrities like that, but also really big brands like Nestle, Tesla, Procter and Gamble, etc. So I'm originally from Canada, so I grew up in Canada from when I was born until I was around 27, and that's when I made the move to Hong Kong. So my parents are originally from Hong Kong, and I just saw the big opportunities that there were in going overseas and learning about Asia. Just a little bit other things about me outside of work. I'm really big on learning. I'm really big on giving back, and so I think work is really important. That's about 8 hours of your day, but it's also really important for me to keep learning. So right now I'm learning Mandarin, which is super important. I'm learning how to code and develop HTML, CSS for websites. And so I just want to spend the time today sharing about what I've learned and the different experiences I've had throughout my life and what landed me here in Hong Kong with Shopify.
Thank you. So, but then in Shopify, I mean, Shopify is a tech company. So what do you
Yeah.
do as a head of Hong Kong?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role is pretty diverse, right? So for large tech companies, they're always thinking about expansion. They're always thinking of entering new markets. Shopify is largely a North American company where our market is US or Canada heavily. But when it comes to entering new markets, there's different things that need to happen. Product needs to be translated, tools and features need to be adapted for a market, and then the brand itself has to create some sort of marketing splash or brand awareness in a region. And that all has to be localized for each country. So we can't take a cookie cutter approach of what we're doing in the US and just put it into Hong Kong or put it into China. Of course, everything has to be translated and localized. So my work is a mix of doing the product stuff, making sure our tools and feature set work really well, doing the marketing side of things, and being present in a lot of the high level discussions with our partners such as Google or Facebook in the local region, or maybe if in Hong Kong, people like SF Express want to work with us, then I'm there chatting with them. And then lastly, just building a general community around our merchants. So we're really focused on not just being a software company. We're really more like an entrepreneurship, community-based company where we're trying to get brands more integrated with each other, tools and app partners building more for merchants, and then giving those merchants like a community to actually work together and grow together, because a lot of entrepreneurs work alone. So yeah, a little bit of those three things: so product, growth, and partnerships.
So do you need to know coding in order to do what you do? Because I know you said that you're learning coding and like being in a tech company, I think naturally people will be like, oh, you have to know how to code, but is that true or not true?
Yeah, so you definitely don't need to code depending on what area of the business that you work on. So I actually got my start on the sales side of the business. So my background before Shopify was I worked at Procter and Gamble. I worked at a consulting company before that, and a lot of that was kind of pitching, selling, strategizing with our clients, and so that's kind of how I came into Shopify. So I was selling product to large companies with a team called Shopify Plus, and that didn't require any code. All you had to do was present the value proposition of the product, see where it lines up with the merchant, maybe line up some vendors to help the merchant build the website, launch the website, and speak a little bit about things like APIs or apps, and talk a little bit about code on a surface level, but not actually really know how to execute on it. But it's of course an asset, right? Because once you're able to articulate in conversation why, how things need to change, how things work in the code base, that's a lot more helpful than if you were just a business guy talking about talking really high level and not really knowing the guts of it. So
then you talked about like, Shopify being a company that localizes with the North American product. So is there some nuances that you can share about what the localization looks like besides just the language piece of it? Like what is there any cultural influences that makes I think user experience different?
yeah, so yeah, this is a really good question because a lot of people think that porting a product over into a region is just translation. Maybe you change the photos for, from a North American person to an Asian person, and that, then it's not so much that, it's that you really have to have a deep understanding of what the market needs, what they're looking for. I'll give you an example where maybe in Hong Kong, in the US, we work with, USPS, FedEx, DHL. Maybe in Hong Kong, when you come here, the partners you need to be working with are SF Express, Hong Kong Post, maybe GoGo Van. So these are all things that we need to take into consideration and actually work with these partners to build out the tooling so that merchants have access to what they are looking for based on what they're used to using. We don't want to force people into using tools that aren't really meant for them. So that's one example. Another example is US, very credit card heavy, starting to have some adoption of Apple Pay, starting to use some cash alternative apps like Venmo or the Cash App. But when you're coming to Hong Kong, you've got this really wide range of payment methods, because Hong Kong is really unique in that it doesn't just serve Hong Kong local buyers, it serves China mainland buyers, it serves overseas buyers that come to visit. So things like credit card are very important, but so are things like PayMe, FPS. Then for China, it'll be Alipay, WeChat Pay, and then as things evolve, you're adding more and more wallets into that. Octopus, for example. There's really nobody that's accepting that on a website or around the world, other than Hong Kong, right? So these are things that we have to think about. Things that our teams have to build, or we have to work really closely with those partners to actually integrate into our technology.
So what would you say what makes Shopify unique as a company to work for?
So this is one of the best things about Shopify is the culture. Whenever we go and work at a company, we're a lot of the times when we're younger, we're looking at the brand. We're looking at, how is this going to look on my resume, or we're looking at how much they pay. What I really like about Shopify is when I interviewed with them, that whole process was very unique. They didn't ask me too much about, what did you do in the past, or, how come you're going to deliver value for our business? They really just took time to understand who I was as a person and what are my goals. And these are things that I think companies tend to neglect nowadays. It's like, you're not just hiring a worker, you're hiring a person, right? A person has ambitions, they have different life experiences, they have, it's their social persona, like how they come in and interact with people at work that they have to know about. So I think Shopify does a really good job of selecting people that are very open-minded, empathetic, and equally driven. So that's, the type of people that they hire, the interview process. But even as a company in itself, it's one of those shining tech companies. You might not see it as much here in Asia, but in Canada, where we're originally from, we've got some of the most amazing offices. I'm pretty sure hands down the best offices in the world. Tech company where you have all your food taken care of, breakfast, lunch, snacks all day, cold pressed juice, beer on tap, slide, go-kart track. So they're really focused on the development of their employees as people beyond just focus on work. They want us to spend time growing ourselves, and where they can help, they'll actually help expense that. There's a really cool thing that they did during 2020, during the COVID peaks, which is people were going to work from home. So they said, hey, everybody's working from home, but here is $2,000 US to spend on upgrading your home and putting in new furniture or making your workstation even better. So that's what makes it different from company. Yeah, and they're not really. I think they've done a really good job because you hear me advocating for it and saying, hey, this is such a great employer. That's almost like free. That's almost like money spent well on an employee that then has another side effect, which is, you recruit some of the best people.
When I first wanted to interview you, we were like, oh, can you show us your office? And you're like, actually, we don't have an office. And I think that's very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about like this whole remote work and what that culture is like as well?
Yeah. So uh, I was doing remote working before it was cool in 2020. So maybe since 2018. So I've been doing it for a little over 2 years now. Shopify has physical offices around the world, but only in really big hubs for the business. In some of these other regions, we're working on expansion. It might not make a whole lot of sense to invest in the office up front. It might start with people going into the market, learning about it, figuring out what we need, and then making the recommendations to build out a team. And there's a lot of things, like a lot of implications around tax, finance, legal when you're launching in new regions, but we're trying to move fast. So we typically, send someone out there and they do what's called an assignment, which is like a temporary work assignment in that region to actually scope out information for the company. So that's what I had started doing, and now started working here full time. And then work from home is a big part of it because nowadays a lot of tech, e-commerce, most of the stuff is cloud-based. So cloud-based being that all you need is an internet connection and you can access all the tools. You don't need to be sitting in an office that has the Ethernet connected to whatever local office server. Yeah, so it's a big part of my working culture because don't have to commute to work, which is really great. It's good for my mental health.
Yeah. So, I mean, like considering that you've been doing this for a while now before everybody had to move into this like remote workspace, like what do you see this remote workspace as like the future for a lot of the next generation to be adopting? Because I mean, I think everybody's doing that in school right now, but like where do you see this whole remote work trend?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be like that's here to stay, and we're going to see about half of the jobs that people traditionally used to do in an office just end up being work from home. And then offices themselves will follow more of like a hoteling model where people come in, they check in, they book a desk for the day, work out of there. Maybe they have a collaborative event. It's still very, very important to see people in person. So it does feel odd. I don't think we'll go to 100% remote because different people will have different propensity or capability to actually work remote. It might not work well for some people's mental health, which is very important, by the way, because I think that's something we definitely neglect, in a career. And when we're thinking about work is like keeping a good mental health, mental standing. And so I think here to stay. So get used to it and start building the skills early on to actually be a good, productive work from home or remote worker, because that's something I also had a challenge with was I can't focus. You sit at home and you watch
So
some
what are your
YouTube.
tips and tricks now that you've been kind of like a veteran in this space? Like how would you advise like students, because even students doing that in home with school right now. So what are some advice?
Yeah. So the toughest thing for people when they work from home is there's just a lot of distractions. I think when you are working from home, you want to be the most productive. You really have to streamline and focus in on one thing at a time, not actually be a multitasker. That's one thing that is emphasized a lot as being efficient is like multitasking. But I find, especially in remote work, that will be your downfall because you'll feel like you're doing a lot of stuff. And then when the time passes, you'll realize you got none of it really done. So that's one tip is, stay singularly focused in your work. I usually don't have a lot of tabs open. That's kind of my pet peeve when I see people with tons of tabs open. I turn off all my notifications for social media, no notification stuff early on in the day, because that will throw you into this distraction of trying to follow that news. Like if something's going on with the election or if there's some big drama in the news, then you read that first thing in the morning, you're going to be thinking about that all day. So you have to find a way to set your mind and balance yourself before you kick off work.
Yeah. So then on the note of work, I mean, you talked a little bit about the areas that you work on. Like, is there anything that you can
Mhm.
show us about the work that you do and really give us a more grounded understanding?
Yeah, for sure. So when you're doing this kind of work, it's kind of interesting because we use a lot of the same tools that people use in their everyday lives, right? Because there's only certain roles that require like enterprisey type tools. For me, a lot of my work is strategic. It's sometimes data driven. It's conversation relationship driven. So I might show you just this, which is tools and platforms. A lot of Slack, a lot of instant messaging, because my work is making sure that our dots are connected across the different regions, across the functional teams. And then this is more for the internal conversation. And then externally, I'll do a lot of phone calls. I'll do a lot of in-person meetings. The guys that go out for coffee that you see out in coffee shops, talking deals, that's kind of what I used to do when we were having a lot more interaction, or going out for dinners and meeting clients. So this is more internally, the tools that we're communicating on. I'm probably in Slack like 20% of the time. I'm just chatting with our teams and strategizing. These are, email. Everybody's using email, but we're very heavily cloud based and using a lot of consumer tools. So you'll see us use more Gmail versus Outlook or some of the other enterprisey type email softwares. Oftentimes I'm reviewing my business as well. So we have a lot of different things that impact the business at Shopify. Some things I analyze are mainly like web and marketing. So how many people are visiting our website, how many people are trying our platform, how many people are making money, how is our dollars being spent on Facebook, how is Google performing, what are our top ranking pages. So I did blank out a lot of what these charts are for obvious reasons, but I'll spend a lot of time with data as well, pulling data, analyzing data, and seeing certain trends. So I might look in, you look in the COVID period, you'll see something like a massive spike around the interest of Shopify, because a lot of businesses are thinking about how to move their business from offline to online. And then when they're doing that, we show up a lot of the time. So when I see opportunities like that, then it's time to engage with, maybe some local government, maybe Hong Kong government. We try and work on doing some sort of subsidy for digital, or we start working with agencies that put out packages to help people launch their business online easier with the help of an agency. Or maybe we work with Google and say, hey, Google, we've got a ton of people trying Shopify. How about we give them $200 of free Google ad credits so that they can start using your platform as well. So we're always thinking about, okay, where in our ecosystem can we find partners and opportunities to help grow entrepreneurship? That's really what we're focused on. It's like helping SMBs, entrepreneurs, to make the most out of e-commerce and online. Then like I said, a lot of relationship stuff happens on LinkedIn as well. So a lot of people hit me up. They might say, hey, this one was, I want to explore a partnership with Shopify. But if it's a good opportunity, then that's where we start working. And LinkedIn's a good place to start finding those connections. And that's something that I use a lot to both advocate our brand, and has been a good opportunity for people to actually reach out to me. And then used to make a lot of calls, like more on the sales side, but sometimes I'm on calls with our partners. I'm helping to close a deal with a big company, or I'm helping our app developers figure out how to build a new tool for our platform. So those are more of the everyday tools that I use within my own work. This is the back end of Shopify, so it's actually the tool that I'm out there advocating for, building tooling for, localizing for our regions. So this is an overview dashboard of the sales numbers, but on the left hand side you'll see orders, products, customer data, marketing, discount apps. These are all things that companies need to run their business in our space. And this is just an example of some of the data that you look at when it comes to an online business. So what are the sales for the day? How many people are visiting the website? How many of them are customers? What are our top selling products? Where are people coming from? So e-commerce in itself is a really vast industry. Shopify touches a little bit of every part of that, where where you have to know a little bit about data, you have to know a little bit about marketing, you have to know about logistics and fulfilling product. And then beyond that, maybe I'll show what it's like to actually do the code for online websites. So
Yeah, and for all these like data points and like the work that you do, and like I mean it sounds like you touch upon a lot of different areas of a business. Like what would you say are the skills that are important to do what you do well?
yeah, so for me, there is a lot of things that I can touch and go deep on, but to do well in a role, it's like keeping an open mind that everything can be learned. Looking at this, it's all gibberish, really, to the average person, right?
Yeah.
But all you can really do when you're working in a new role or you're learning some new function is know that it can be learned. Having that growth mindset. Anytime we approach new things, we can feel like it's insurmountable. But if you just learn it piece by piece, line by line, it can be done. And then you find things that you want to lean into as an expert, right? So my expertise more on the sales and strategy side. Probably not going to be a world-class developer, but just knowing a surface level will help me in other areas of my role. So yeah, so sometimes we'll look into here, and this is another area that touches e-commerce. It's the coding, designing of websites. And then in the end, you might have something like this. So then this is something I designed with, it's not overly complex, but it's just a shopping page where we're running a donation program, and then, something simple. All in all, e-commerce is a massively growing industry. There's a lot to be done. I tend to work on more the strategy and product side and growth side, but there's other areas within it that are really important. That's really what I continue to advocate for. Is we're seeing how COVID is changing a lot of people's buying behaviors. We're seeing how brands are changing and evolving. This is going to be around to stay. So it's an industry that I've found a lot of passion in, because I used to work on kind of retail. I really like technology, and that just sits in the middle of both. So highly encourage people to look into it as well.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing all this, because I think that's really insightful for students to understand more about e-commerce, and especially when you're bringing a big company from North America over to Asia and what that looks like. And so I think before I ask more questions, I'm sure a lot of students out there will want to ask questions too. So I think let's move on to the live Q&A.
Sure, sounds good.
Perfect.